everybody, welcome to another quick video. Now today I'm going to cover something I've been asked about, which is how I design the 3D printed parts that I actually put in the van. So what I'm going to do today to show you how I actually sort of design and build one of the little pots that I put the jars in. But I'll show you what I do, and I've got this handy little thing which is really the key to getting things right. I'll show you how I use it. So this is a digital vernier gauge. Basically what it is, it's a very accurate ruler. And this being digital, you've actually got a little readout on there, and basically as you actually move the wheel there, you can see the numbers change, and that actually corresponds to the measurement that you've made. And essentially you've got two methods of measuring. You've got this, which is for measuring the outer dimensions, and that for the inner dimensions. And I'll just grab one of the pots. I'll have the coffee pot. I'll show you how I measure that. So there's our little coffee pot. And what we need to do is just expand these out so that will fit around the outside, so we can get an exact measurement. It's handy that these actually are slightly square because I can get around it a little bit easier, but that'll actually give me an accurate measurement, which is 79.42mm, so as near as damn it 80mm across. So then I know the pot needs to be 80mm to actually hold on to that. Now just from sort of experience, I know that on stuff like this you need to be about a third of the way up your item if you're going to have something that's going to move around. Sorry about the traffic noise, just cars going around everywhere. But basically that will stop anything from sort of moving, tipping over, because if you have it a little bit too low, it's quite easy for things to tip, but if you have it higher up, it just stops that from happening. So we've got our measurement. We know it's as near as damn it a round shape. These are actually slightly squared off. I don't know if you can make that out, but they're slightly squared off jars. But it'd be the same for a round jar as well. But we've got the measurement, so let's go and transfer that onto the computer. So here we are in the software that I use. Well, I say software, it's actually a web application called Tinkercad, free of charge to use. Literally just go to tinkercad.com and you can sign up and use this free of charge. Now, it's something that I discovered many years ago when I first started with 3D printers, and it's the most basic system, but you can get some really interesting shapes out of it, and it works really well for the stuff I do. So this is the main screen. Obviously you've got a load of shapes down the right hand side, your main sort of work area there, and it sort of gives you some controls for the viewpoint, etc. Now it automatically assigns a random name to it, so we'll just change that at the moment. We'll call it Vanpot, can't spell, Vanpot Test. There we go. And what I tend to do is actually drop what they call a ruler on it, which is this one over here, and I just pop it down this bottom corner, and that basically means that anything that I drop on there will have a measurement on it, so it works that way. So first thing we want to do, we want to grab hold of a box and sort of create the dimensions that we're looking for. So here's our box, and we know it's 80mm by 80mm is what we're after, and height wise I know the height is around about 100mm on those, so say about 30, so that'll give us that third of the way up the pots to stop it from dropping out. So that essentially is our sort of basic shape. So it's literally just a box. Now obviously that's the internal dimension that we want. So my normal rule of thumb is for something like that, you want about a 1mm wall to make it strong enough when it's printed. So we need to add 2mm onto the dimensions, so it needs to be 82 long by 82 wide. So that gives us the size. Now what we can also do is actually add a radius to it, so it just smooths off the edges. I do tend to do that quite well. Like I say, you can go really extreme with it, but a 1mm radius will just take the edges off and just make it look a little bit nicer. The steps part on this is how many steps you put in the radius, and I'll ramp that up to 20, which is its highest point. And you can just zoom into that now. See that now? Got some nice little rounded edges, so it's just a little bit prettier. Right, so that's our shape, but at the minute that's a solid box. We need that to be not a solid box, essentially. We need to have a space to put the jar into. So what we do, we use this one, which is the box tool again, but it's actually a hole. So if we set the length and etc. for that, which this time is 80 by 80 because this is the internal dimensions, set the height at 30 again. What I'm going to do with this is actually increase the radius to a 2mm radius, which make it a little bit more curvy than the outside. Main reason being is it gives it a little bit of grip when you put the pot into it, so it doesn't rattle around quite so much. But that essentially will be our internal shape. Now we need to actually put that, we'll give it, let's say we'll give it a 2mm base. So we'll actually increase the height of that up to 2mm, and we want to then align these. So we sort of select those, drag around, and this tool up here is the align tool. Click these little markers. That then aligns that horizontally across its X and Y axis, and there we go, that's sort of that in place. And if I just click that one, that'll actually group the two together, and because that second one I put in there was a hole, it actually creates a cutout, and there's our little 3D printed shape. As quick and easy as that. There's nothing to it at all. But as you can see on the inside, that has a nice little rounded shape, so there's no sort of hard edges or anything like that on it. I mean, if you wanted to go mad and actually sort of save a bit of space, you could actually sort of make that base a little bit thinner. But I tend to sort of give it a good couple of mil. It's just a little bit of protection then, so if you've got it stuck down like we have in the van, if you then want to move it, you don't have an issue with it sort of tearing the bottom out because it's too thin, so it's just a little bit of protection on it. But yeah, that's essentially the shape that we've gone for. And on this then, literally all I'd do is I'd export that as an STL file, which can be incorporated into the 3D printer software. So I'll do that now. And this is the software that I use to actually prep it for using with the 3D printer. It's called Simplify 3D. There's a lot of 3D printers now come with free software, so it's not something you really need to worry about, but they do all tend to be different, so this is more sort of how I do it. But if I import that now, and I'll just find the save that I just put in there. As you can see, I do quite a bit of printing of different things. We've got van pot test, there we go, and there's our little pot that we just designed. And essentially you have on this one various different processes. So if we go into there, so we've got an infill for something like that. I probably want it to be around about 25% infill. It doesn't need to be too much, and that's basically just how much actual sort of print goes in, so how it's going to sort of fill the inner spaces that aren't solid walls. Layer wise, all this I've preset to suit my printer exactly, so a lot of the stuff sort of is very much specific to my printer, but it gives you some idea of how systems work. On this you can actually generate support, so you can actually do stuff that's essentially printed in thin air, but for this we don't need to do that. So 25% infill, okay, and we'll just hit prepare to print. And what that's done is given us essentially a guide for the 3D printer to actually sort of extrude all the filament out, go that way. If I sort of run the preview line on this and hit play, if I just adjust that, this is basically a simulation of how the printer will actually form the actual the print itself. As you can see, it sort of runs through, does the base, and then will work its way around the outside, doing the wall for us. You can see on that, it should take around about 2 hours 16 minutes to print. It will use up just under 7.5 meters of filament, and it will weigh 22 grams. It's pretty close to exactly how it is, but yeah, that's how it all works. And obviously when you sort of transfer this over to the printer, then this is essentially what you get. It'll actually build that from the filament. Obviously, as all 3D printers are slightly different, it's not really much point in showing that being printed, but you get some idea of how this is set out and how it works. You can actually see on this bit, it's actually doing the honeycomb infill. So this is what I was talking about with the 25%. So basically, that is at 25% of the area being infilled in what they call a fast honeycomb. So inside the actual walls, it's not a complete solid, it's sort of meshed out, so it takes up a lot less of the filament, takes a lot less time, and obviously if that's important, it also saves weight as well. I do quite a lot of 3D printing for radio control planes, so that's one of the things that's really handy. So you've got the strength because it's a honeycomb structure inside, but you're not carrying the weight from it. But yeah, very clever software. Like I say, a lot of 3D printers now, when you buy them, they actually come with their own slicing software built into it. But basically, I'll take this file now, once it's actually saved out, and upload that to the printer, and it'll just print out for me. Really quick and easy. Takes a couple of hours or so, but once you've got that, you've got a 3D printed part that you've designed, completely custom, and it's exactly to the dimensions that you wanted it. So really good. And so there we are, that's the finished result, how it comes out. Now I've done on there, just put a little bit of these sort of soft velcro pads around it, just give it a little bit of cushioning. Really, it doesn't really do much for it, but as you can see, it's really difficult for them to move around and actually sort of go anywhere. And we've had them in there for a few months now, done various different terrains and stuff like that. Never been a problem at all, so yeah, they've worked really well. Just handy little sort of storage, so I can just drop them on there. They're easily to hand and they're not going to go anywhere. And obviously you've got to have your tea, coffee and chocolate. Yeah, it's part of the van life really. I did a similar thing with the cups as well. That was literally just a case of measured around the base of the cup, around about the third of the way up, and went for a round shape this time, and I literally just put a cut out wide enough for the handle, so that stops that from going anywhere at all. Really simple design and really easy, but yeah, nice sort of addition to the van though. So hopefully that's been fairly useful for you. You've got an idea of how I actually build things and do bits and bobs with the 3D printing. I'd say it's a fairly straightforward process. You just have to know a little bit to actually sort of get your head around how it all goes together. But if you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up, really helps us out. And if you're not subscribed, do hit that subscribe button. Like I say, I'm only doing sort of bi-weekly videos at the minute, but I've got something fairly major coming up that you might be interested in, so keep an eye out for that. But thanks for watching, we'll see you again soon. Take care.